Hi, my name is Timo Lüge and I want to talk a little bit about social media staff guidelines for non-profit organizations. The case study I'm using is from the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, because that is where until recently I was responsible for all social media activities. Before we get into the staff guidelines itself, I want to start with talking a little bit about how non-profit organizations, or how the senior management normally sees communication in general. In my opinion, it's very much like this. Communication is something that we want to see contained. Definitely not something that is, too wild or too crazy. It's supposed to be pretty to look at, but and it's perfectly okay if it's a little bit dry. So I think that is something that most of our management would be very comfortable with. Now this is also something that we like. This is something where more communication part actually comes in. Someone standing in the middle. Everybody listening to us. I mean, that is more what the communicators are very comfortable with, and of course also our management. Now this is already something where everybody gets a little bit uncomfortable. Loads of people milling around. It's not quite clear who's in charge. Some people are talking to this woman. Some people are talking to this guy. And there's no clear center. There's no coherence. But of course, this is far more realistic of communication with a big group, particularly when we're talking about social media. But the thing that really worries most organizations is not even that, but this guy. And I apologize to my friend from the Norwegian Red Cross, but the thing that a lot of non-profit organizations, and particularly those who work in the field in humanitarian response, are actually quite worried about is what their staff might say about the organization. Because of course today, this guy is not only a staff member who is in Haiti, but through social media can post, can blog, can share photos, can share all kinds of information with the whole world. In a way, every staff member today has the ability to be a communicator. And that is not always what fits in with our communication strategy, and that is not always what is desirable. So what do organizations normally do? In my experience, the immediate reaction by most organizations is this. Tell people not to talk. Unless you're a communicator, you're not allowed to speak. In the example of the IFRC, for example, this is a paragraph from our Code of Conduct, which says that all staff shall not publish any work, including writings, photographs, video footage, etc., that has been produced in connection with or that is related to their assignment and functions with the federations without prior approval of the Secretary General. In essence, that says, if we have a staff member who's out in the field and puts a photo up on Flickr or on Facebook, or uploads a short video on YouTube, then he would first have to ask the Secretary General. Now, that is clearly not going to work. And it clearly shows that this was written a while ago and is not what we should be following anymore today. In a way, I think what we have to come to is we have to see that communication by our staff is not a risk, but it's actually a chance. And this is a change which I think to a degree is already happening, and we now just have to give the organization and staff the right tools so that all happens in a way that is helpful and appropriate. Now, the first thing, if you want to do that, and I really recommend that you do that in your organization, is you find out what rules already exist. I bet you that most organizations already have something in their contracts or code of conduct, or whatever name it, where there's already some rules about communication by staff about the work. Most people have that. I really recommend you look into that, and then you find things like what I explained before, the code of conduct. So yeah, do that first. And while I was doing that, and when I saw that first paragraph, I thought oh my god, this is going to be really difficult, right? So what I expected was pretty much this, and I'm I'm not the car in that picture. I thought, okay, I would have to do a lot of pushing, and to try to move these big organizations towards a little bit more openness. And it would be really difficult. And maybe once in a while, there would be a risk of the car actually rolling the other way. And so that is very much what I expected. Instead, what I got was pretty much this. I was amazed how happy people were when I came to them with this idea of writing social media staff guidelines. It was really, I did not expect that. It was everywhere when people were like, we're really glad you're doing this. Come in. How can we do this? What can we do? And so that was extremely positive. The reasons it was as easy as it was, in my opinion, there's a couple of them. One of them is that since the Obama campaign, social media has become sexy. So senior management actually now sees this increasingly as a chance, not necessarily, for staff, but in general. They're open to the fact that, you can actually do things with social media if you do it right. Of course, they don't see that you also need loads of money like Obama had, but that is an entirely different discussion, of course. Now, management also knows that rules are needed, and the same goes for HR. When you talk to your HR people, most of them will be aware of cases where people, in other countries or in other situations were even fired because, they were doing some things on Facebook that they shouldn't have done. So there's an awareness that it would be good to have those rules, but most people don't have them. I also found that a lot of staff want guidance. When I spoke to people within the organization who were already active on social media networks, they were very happy. It was that someone was taking this on, and we're quite happy with receiving guidance so that they would know what the boundaries were. As I already said, most people I found were very happy for someone else to take the lead, so they don't have to do it themselves. And as you know, whoever writes the first draft basically controls the direction of where it's going. Dozens of examples already exist, so you can show, this is not something you've just come up with, but this is, something that other organizations have done in a similar way. And last but not least, what I think is really important, it's, social media communication is a communications tool. And I think it should be the communications department or someone within communications who's responsible for the social media staff guidelines, and it shouldn't be HR. If communications does not take it on, I can almost guarantee you that sooner or later HR will take it on. And I think generally this is something that really should be under the realm of communication, in my experience. Now, the overall idea of everything that is in the social media staff guidelines of the IFSC is that we want to help staff and volunteers to share their passion. Because most people are really passionate about what they do. And what is more interesting than, have passionate people talk about the good things the organization does and, share that with everybody they know in their social network. So that is what we want to do, and that is where we want to help. That's what we want to help them to do. Now, here's some key guidelines. And if you want to read all of them, they're actually available on my blog, which is Social Media for Good, or short just SM. 4 is a number, good.com. See it at the bottom right. I'll also link to it from the description. You can download that and share that. Is licensed through Creative Commons license, so that's okay. So anyhow, the key guidelines for me are like, be passionate. When you talk about the work you do for the organization, be passionate about it. Passion is contagious, and that's a good thing in this case. The second thing, or the second guideline, and for me that is one of the most important, is think of C&M, your mom, your boss. If you're not comfortable with it showing up on CNN the next day, if you're not comfortable with your mom reading it or your boss reading it, then maybe you should think twice about whether it's a good idea to post it. Probably not. But if you have doubts, and that's where the next one comes in, is ask for advice. And this is clearly, the main person to ask for advice if it's work-related is obviously your line manager. But you can also contact the media unit in Geneva, because they are the ones who are responsible for social media activities of the organization. The next one, Don't use the emblems. That's a little bit specific for the Red Cross, Red Crescent. It basically says, do not have big red cross or big red crescent in the background of, for example, your profile picture and so forth, because that might give the impression that this is an official presence, whereas of course clearly it is your personal profile. And we also, by the way, say put in like a disclaimer so that it's clear, so that belongs to that, distinguishing between personal and private communication. The last thing is, of course, stay focused on your job, saying just because we encourage you to talk about your work does not mean that this should replace your actual job. So those are the key guidelines. Who to involve? These are the people I involved, and I think it was a very good mix. HR, who actually already know a lot of the existing guidelines. They should. Communication, because it's a communications tool. IT, because it is communication with work equipment over the internet, and there might be rules about what is permissible or not. Legal, always a good thing, to have one of them look at it. Very important in my opinion, staff association. You're talking about, how do you regulate, staff's communication to a degree also, outside working hours. So I think having staff association on board is very important. And last but not least, field security. They might have some important things to say, particularly around operations. Now, the whole thing took 2 months from start to finish. If someone had told me that when I started the process, I wouldn't have believed it. But again, people were very happy for me to take this on. There was loads of good material I could already use to create this guideline, so it was actually possible to do it in 2 months from start to finish, which just shows how large also the demand was for this to be done quickly. Now, what are the next steps? At the moment, those guidelines are given to all new staff as part of the package they get from Human Resources, so everybody knows about it. In addition, of course, when they were released the first time, they were sent out by the senior management team to all staff. I also think it's helpful that there are guidelines, not rules. So we are saying, like, we are trying to help you to do something that you enjoy anyhow, which is communicating with your friends. We're not trying to say like, oh, you cannot do this and stuff like that. Of course, we still are, but we're phrasing it slightly more nicely. I think it's important that responsibility remains with management. Anything that staff does that is work-related is the responsibility of that person's manager. And the last thing I think is very important is that the whole guidelines are full of examples, and they try to approach everything with common sense. They do not try to define things that cannot be defined. They do not try to be too specific. They just try to give general guidance as opposed to regulating every little thing. And with that, I'm saying thank you. That was the case study of how the staff guidelines around social media were written for the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. I hope you find them useful. As I said, you can download them from my blog. The address is in the description. And with that, I'll wish you a good day.